Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today, looking specifically at Exodus chapter 21.
That's right. And the goal here is really to get under the hood of these ancient laws, understand the rules, the regulations.
See what they tell us about that society. So, looking at this text, where does it kick things off?
Yeah, it starts right away with laws about servants, Hebrew servants specifically.
Okay, servants. So, people working within households. What's the main rule there?
The core rule is pretty clear. Serve 6 years, and then in the seventh, you go free.
Free and clear, no strings attached.
Exactly. No payment required to leave. And it adds a detail. If you came in alone, you leave alone.
Makes sense. What if they were married already?
If they were married when they started their service, the wife goes free with them. Seems straightforward enough, right?
Yeah, seems fair on the surface.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling there's a twist.
There is, and it's a crucial one. What if the master gives the servant a wife during his service? Maybe another woman enslaved in the household.
Ah, okay. And they have children, let me guess.
You got it. The text says the wife and the children, they belong to the master.
Wow. So only the man walks free in the 7th year,
Yeah,
leaving his family.
that's what it says. It's a really stark illustration of how family and property rights were intertwined. Pretty challenging to think about.
Definitely changes the picture. So, okay, what if the guy doesn't want to leave? I mean, if his wife and kids have to stay.
The law actually anticipates that exact situation. If the servant makes a formal declaration, something like, I love my master, my wife, my kids, I don't want to go free.
There's a process for that.
Yes, a very specific one.
Right.
He's taken before the judges, or maybe it means before God, depending on the translation.
Interesting.
And then they go to the door or the doorpost of the master's house. Very symbolic spot.
Right. The threshold he's choosing not to cross into freedom, what happens there?
The master takes an awl, a sharp tool,
Yeah.
and pierces the servant's ear against the doorpost.
Pierces his ear. A permanent mark.
Exactly. And the outcome. He becomes that master's servant for life, permanently bound.
So it's his choice, but it's sealed by the master's action in public with a physical mark. That's powerful. It really locks in that status.
It really does. It shows how personal declaration, ritual, and the master's authority all came together in their legal system.
Okay, so that covers Hebrew men serving.
Yeah.
What about women? The text moves on to female servants next.
It does. And it immediately says, look, the rules are different here. If a father sells his daughter into service.
Which is, wow, a concept in itself.
Right. But if he does, the text states very clearly she does not go free after 6 years like the men do.
Okay, so a fundamental difference from the start. What happens to her then? What are the scenarios?
Well, scenario one, maybe the master picked her out for himself, perhaps as a wife or concubine, but then he's not pleased with her.
Okay. Can he just sell her off?
No, actually. The law says he has to let her be redeemed, like her family gets a chance to buy her back.
For redemption.
And importantly, he's explicitly forbidden from selling her to foreigners.
Why is that?
The text says because he's broken faith with her. It suggests there was some kind of commitment implied when he first took her. He can't just treat her like any other property if the intended relationship failed.
Interesting. So there's some protection there tied to that initial expectation. What's the next scenario?
Scenario two. The master selects her not for himself, but for his son.
Okay, like arranging a marriage or partnership for his son within the household.
Seems like it. And if he does that, he must treat her according to the rights of a daughter.
The rights of a daughter. That sounds like a significant step up.
Huge. It suggests incorporation into the family, legally speaking, not just a servant anymore.
Right. And scenario three. What if the master did take her for himself, maybe as a first wife or concubine, and then he marries another woman?
Yeah, so he takes a second wife. What happens to the first woman, the servant wife?
Does he have to keep supporting her?
Absolutely. The law is specific. He cannot deprive her of her food, her clothing, and her marital rights. Those three things.
Food, clothing, marital rights. Explicit. And if he fails, if he neglects her after taking the new wife.
And she goes free, just walks away, no payment needed.
So even though the starting point was she doesn't go free, there are paths to freedom based on the master's actions or failures, especially regarding her basic rights and status within the marriage dynamic. It's much more layered than I first thought.
Exactly. It's complex. Her fate is tied closely to the master's conduct and the nature of their relationship.
Okay, moving away from the master-servant stuff, the text then shifts to violence and injury between people more generally.
Yeah, it gets into laws about homicide and assault. Pretty serious territory.
So baseline rule, Someone strikes another person, and that person dies. What's the consequence?
The text is blunt. Surely put to death. Capital punishment for killing someone.
Okay. But does it make allowances for accidents? Like if it wasn't intentional?
It does. It draws a distinction. If it was unintentional, the text has this striping phrase, God lets it happen, then it's different.
How so?
The killer is supposed to flee to a designated place, a place of refuge or sanctuary.
Ah, so a system for handling accidental deaths differently from murder. Intent matters.
Hugely. Because if someone did plan it, if they schemed and killed someone deliberately,
Then the refuge doesn't apply.
no way. The text says they should be taken even from the altar, the holiest place, and put to death. No sanctuary for premeditated murder.
Wow, okay. That distinction between intentional and unintentional is key.
Then there are a couple of really stark laws about family, specifically parents.
Right, I saw those. Attacking your father or mother.
The penalty is death. Simple as that.
And not just physical attack, right? What about cursing them?
Same penalty. Must be put to death.
Just for cursing parents. That tells you a lot about the emphasis on parental authority and respect in that society. It wasn't just about physical harm.
Exactly. It underscores the immense weight placed on honoring your parents.
What comes next? Ah, kidnapping.
Yep. A short, clear law. If you kidnap someone,
Whether you sell them or you're just caught still holding them.
the penalty is death. Taking away someone's freedom like that was treated with the utmost severity.
Okay, what about fights that don't end in death? Say, two guys are arguing, one hits the other with a rock or his fist. The injured person is laid up in bed for a while.
Right, a non-fatal assault scenario. The text addresses this quite practically.
So, if the injured person eventually recovers,
Yeah.
gets up, walks around, even if they need a cane or something.
Then the attacker is not held liable for their death because, well, they didn't die directly from that blow. They recovered to some extent.
Okay, so no murder charge. But surely the attacker doesn't just walk away free.
No, definitely not. They still have to pay. The assailant must compensate the injured person for their lost time, the time they couldn't work.
Makes sense. Lost wages, essentially.
Exactly. And they also have to pay for their complete healing, cover all the medical costs, basically, until they're fully recovered.
So, financial responsibility for the consequences of the assault, even if it wasn't fatal, focuses on making the injured party whole again, economically and physically.
Precisely.
Now, the text seems to loop back to the master-slave relationship again, but focusing on injuries caused by the master.
Yes, it revisits that dynamic. If a master beats a male or female slave with a rod, and the slave dies right there as a direct result,
Is the master held accountable?
the text says the master must be punished. It's interesting, it doesn't explicitly say put to death here, like in other cases, but punishment is definitely required.
But then comes that difficult part. What if the slave doesn't die immediately?
Right. If the slave survives for a day or two after the beating,
Then what?
then the master is not punished.
Not punished at all, and the reason given.
The text states it very plainly.
Right.
Since the slave is his property,
Oof, that's blunt. It really highlights the legal status difference, doesn't it? The master's liability changes based purely on whether the slave survives a day or two, tied directly to ownership.
it's a very challenging passage, starkly showing how property rights intersected with and sometimes overrode accountability for violence against the enslaved.
Yeah. But then it shifts slightly again when it comes to certain types of injury,
Yeah.
right? What about permanent damage, like losing an eye?
Yes, that's different. If a master hits a slave in the eye and destroys it,
What happens?
the master must let the slave go free. Freedom is the compensation for the lost eye.
Freedom for an eye, that's significant. Does it apply to other injuries?
It mentions knocking out a tooth specifically. Same rule. The slave goes free as compensation for the tooth.
So even within this system where slaves are property, there's a line. Causing specific irreversible physical harm, losing an eye, a tooth triggers the loss of the master's property right. The slave gains their freedom.
It suggests a recognition of bodily integrity, even for a slave, up to a point. Causing that kind of permanent damage had a unique consequence: manumission. It adds another layer of complexity to how we understand servitude in this code.
Okay, the next section deals with pregnant women getting injured.
Yes, specifically in the context of men fighting, if guys are brawling and they accidentally hit a pregnant woman.
And she gives birth prematurely.
Right. The first question is, was there any serious injury to the woman beyond the premature birth?
Okay. If there wasn't, if she's okay, but the baby came early.
Then the one who hit her has to pay a fine. The amount seems to be negotiated by the husband but needs court approval.
A financial penalty
Ah.
set by the husband in court.
Got it.
But what if there is serious injury to the woman?
Then the law changes dramatically. That's where the famous eye for an eye principle comes in.
Lex talionis.
Exactly. The text says you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot.
Burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise.
Whoa. So if the woman suffers serious harm, the penalty escalates to equivalent retribution or compensation based on the injury sustained. Life for life, if it comes to that.
The principle is belied very directly there.
And then the final parts of this chapter shift to animals, particularly issues with bulls.
Ah, yes, the goring ox. A classic. What's the basic rule if someone's bull gores a person and they die?
Okay, first step. The bull is considered culpable. It must be stoned to death, and its meat can't be eaten.
The bull pays the price. What about the owner?
Initially, if this was like out of the blue, the bull wasn't known to be dangerous, the owner isn't held responsible.
Okay, so owner is off the hook if it's a first-time unexpected event.
Sure.
But what if the bull was known to be aggressive?
That's the key. If the bull habitual gored and the owner had been warned about it but didn't pen it up properly.
Negligence, basically.
Exactly, and then it kills someone.
The owner's in trouble.
Big trouble. The bull is still stoned, but the owner is also to be put to death.
Death for the owner, too,
Yeah.
for failing to control a known dangerous animal.
That's the penalty for that level of negligence resulting in death. However,
It's not that. There's an alternative.
there's an alternative mentioned. If a ransom, a payment is demanded instead,
Yeah.
perhaps by the victim's family or the authorities, the owner can pay that ransom, whatever amount is set, and redeem their own life.
So capital punishment is prescribed, but there's a possibility of substituting a financial payment to save the owner's life.
Interesting. Does this apply equally if the victim is, say, a child?
Yes, the text explicitly says the same law applies if the bull gores a son or a daughter. Same rules for the bull and the owner.
Okay. What if the victim is a slave?
Different rule again. If the bull gores a male or female slave,
The owner doesn't face death.
no. The bull is still stoned, but the owner's penalty is purely financial. Pay 30 shekels of silver.
30 shekels, that specific amount. And who gets the money?
It's paid to the slave's master.
Paid to the master, not the slave's family. It's compensation for damaged property, essentially.
That's exactly how it reads. It's a fixed price for the loss of the slave paid to the owner. Again, you see that stark legal distinction based on the status of the person killed.
Yeah, it's consistently there. What about other animal trouble? Like digging pits. Right. If someone digs or uncovers a pit and doesn't cover it back up, and an ox or a donkey falls in and dies,
The pit owner is responsible.
yes, they have to pay the full value of the dead animal to its owner.
And what happens to the dead animal?
The dead animal then belongs to the pit owner. So they pay for the loss and get the carcass, basically. Liability rests on whoever created the hazard.
Okay, and the last bit here seems to be about animals injuring other animals. Bull versus bull.
Exactly. If one person's bull injures another's and the injured bull dies, what happens?
Seems like it could happen fairly often with livestock.
Right. If it's just, an accident, no known prior aggression, the solution is pretty communal.
How so?
They sell the live bull, the one that did the goring. They take that money, plus the dead bull, and divide it all equally between the two owners.
Split the proceeds and the carcass,
Yeah.
share the loss. Seems equitable for an accident.
It does. But again, what if the owner knew their bull was aggressive, had a habit of goring, but they didn't restrain it?
Then the negligent owner pays more.
Much more. If that prior knowledge and negligence is established, the negligent owner has to pay full compensation, animal for animal.
So they pay the full value of the dead bull to the other owner.
Right. And in this case, the dead animal belongs entirely to the negligent owner. They bear the full cost because they fail to act on a known risk. Again, distinguishing accident from negligence.
Wow. So that's quite a tour through Exodus 21. We've covered, a lot. Servitude rules, violence, family authority, kidnapping, specific injuries, animal liabilities.
It's incredibly detailed, isn't it? It's not just broad strokes. It gets into very specific scenarios and lays out consequences. You get a real sense of people trying to regulate daily life and conflicts.
Definitely. And as we've gone through it, one thing that just keeps jumping out is how much the outcome depends on who is involved.
Absolutely. Free person, slave, son, daughter, master, parent. The status and relationship fundamentally shape the legal consequences, the level of protection, the type of compensation.
Yeah, that hierarchy seems baked into the very fabric of these laws. There's not one single standard of justice.
Yeah.
It seems tiered based on social standing and relationship.
It really does, and maybe that's the thing to leave you thinking about. What does this layered system of accountability tell us about the values and the structure of that ancient society? How did they conceive of justice when the value assigned to a life or an injury could differ so much depending on who you were?
A lot to chew on there. It definitely paints a complex picture of their world.